What makes a good spin-off series? Maintaining the core themes of the source material, introducing new themes, expanding on the world and characters, being similar enough that it's familiar to us, but different and new enough that it's fresh and interesting. Star Wars The Clone Wars has all of these, and more. Starting off as a semi-decent spin-off from the prequel trilogy, The Clone Wars continued to evolve and grow throughout its run into a diverse, intriguing, and surprisingly deep series that I can honestly say is my favourite piece of Star Wars media ever. And this isn't just because I grew up alongside it. No, this show is far, far more than that, delving into themes, ideas, and storylines darker and sometimes more significant than a lot of the films. The Clone Wars had quite a rough start. It had to fill the shoes of the previous Clone Wars miniseries, which was well regarded as enough. The perfect amount of story and action to inform the audience on what the Clone Wars was, the key players, and the battles that took place. So in 2008, when the Clone Wars movie came out as a virtual pilot for the series, the response was subpar. With complaints of the animation looking janky and unfinished, the characters behaving weirdly, and the new character, Ahsoka Tano, being seen as annoying and unnecessary. When the actual series began to appear, it was a definite improvement in quality. However, some complaints stuck. So how did the Clone Wars go from being described as annoying, disruptive, and downright unnecessary, into a beloved piece of Star Wars that is often thrown in with the films in terms of quality and story?
This is where the fun begins.
A big part of why the Clone Wars became so rooted in the hearts of fans is the treatment of characters. Whether it be a new character who adds a different perspective to the themes of the films, an improved character who is transformed into one of the most compelling in Star Wars, or an already great character who is perfectly maintained from the films and made even better with the freedom of a series format. These all appear in Clone Wars, and are a clear demonstration of the show's excellence. The best example of how the Clone Wars handles characters can be seen in the Clone Troopers. The clones are the heart and soul of this series. They're the driving force for many of the main storylines, and end up being some of the best and most unique characters in the entire series. What makes the clones such great characters is that unlike the films, each clone feels like a real, individual person.
Deceive you, Eyes can. In the Force, very different each one of you are.
Even with them being literal copies of each other on the outside, they're all distinctly different people on the inside.
But I am not just another number. None of us are.
Part of this is due to the talent of voice actor D. Bradley Baker, but credit is also due to the animators and writers who give each clone a life and personality of their own. The friendships and camaraderie between the clones is also a big factor in what makes them feel real. One instance of this is the Domino Squad, made up of Fives, Echo, Cut Up, Droidbait, and Heavy. First appearing in the 5th episode of the series, the Domino Squad evolves and changes throughout all 7 seasons of the Clone Wars. Each stage of their careers is seen, their formation as cadets, their conflicts, their rise through the ranks, their struggles, and their loyalty to one another. The feeling of grief each time one of them is lost in battle is real. They genuinely care for each other, and as such, the audience cares for them. This contrasts brilliantly with the droids of the Separatist army. You genuinely feel bad whenever a clone trooper dies in this series, because they're not treated like set pieces or expendable extras that have no greater meaning in the story. Their deaths have weight, and so they should. Echo! The Clone Wars also gives us insight into the experiences and introspective conflicts of clone troopers, and this is done through the character of Captain Rex. Rex is my personal favourite clone trooper, having the most screen time of any other clone and appearing in over 60 episodes of the series. He's a well-established character with actual depth, beginning the series as a no-nonsense, by-the-book trooper whose loyalty is solely in that of the Galactic Republic. His loyalty is rocked over the course of the Clone Wars, and he comes to question the war and his purpose in it entirely. This leads directly into Rebels, where Captain Rex sides with the Rebellion instead of the Empire, as he sees the failings of the system he was once a part of. In the Clone Wars, Rex is one of the most respected soldiers and leaders in the entire Grand Army of the Republic, and he often gets his own storylines that show his inner conflicts being a part of that army, most notably the Umbara arc. where his role as a clone, his loyalty to the Republic, and his responsibility to his men as a captain is tested to its limits.
I used to believe that being a good soldier meant doing everything they told you. But we're not droids. You have to learn to make your own decisions.
The episode Deserter, where Rex finds a clone deserter on a far-off planet, and comes face to face with the idea of leaving the war behind.
You've thought about what your life could look like if you would also leave the army?
And later decides to let the deserter live his life normally, instead of turning him in.
You're still a deserter, Cut. But you're certainly not a coward.
These stories display excellently the experience of what the life of a clone is like, and how it's a constant struggle to find your own identity amongst billions of people who are designed to be the same as you. However, as the show progresses, the clones become more familiar, comfortable, and proud of their identities, and this is reflected in their relationships with others, most notably their Jedi generals, who become like family to them, and an integral part of the clones forming those identities.
Why are you so certain no one is coming?
We're just clones, sir. We're meant to be expendable.
Not to me.
A final example of the clone troopers' characterization in Clone Wars is their treatment during Order 66, when they're ordered, and really forced to kill their Jedi, their friends, who they've fought valiantly alongside for years in battle. This is yet another example of how the Clone Wars humanizes the clones. There's the obvious example of Rex struggling to fight the Order to kill Ahsoka. However, the humanity within each of the clones is shown even more by those who are fully affected by the Order. Even though being controlled, the clones are still not mindless droids, and are able to be reasoned and negotiated with. Ahsoka and Rex still treat them with respect, refusing to kill their former allies, acknowledging that what's happening to them isn't their fault.
But I am not the one who is going to kill them.
This just makes it even more devastating when all the clones die. However, even in death, the clones are still treated with the respect they deserve. Each body is retrieved from the wreckage and given a proper burial, their identities maintained, not remembered as the clones who betrayed their Jedi, but as the men who fought bravely alongside them and gave their lives in a war they were never meant to win. The clones, who only exist because of the war, are remembered as men. Anakin Skywalker is great in the Clone Wars. So much so that he actually compliments Hayden Christensen's performance of Anakin in the films, which has been heavily criticised in the past. Anakin goes from being overly emotional and quite unnatural at times in the films to just a normal, understandable guy who, at his core, is controlled by his emotions but made to hide them in Clone Wars. That's why the Clone Wars does such a good job with Anakin, because the series builds on his character from the films, rather than having a cheap retcon.
I understand wanting to walk away from the Order.
Anakin's trouble following the Jedi rules is a frequent occurrence in the series, and his intolerance for it really builds as the show progresses, to the point where sometimes he downright disobeys orders and tells the Jedi they're wrong. This makes Anakin so much more interesting. In the films, he expresses disdain towards the Jedi Order's rules, but he never does anything about it. But because of Clone Wars, we know that this is not the case, and this makes his fall to the dark side much more believable and tragic.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them!
Everyone can agree that in the films, specifically the prequels, much of the dialogue is stilted and very exposition heavy.
I don't like sand.
Clone Wars does quite the opposite by following one simple rule: show, don't tell. In the films, we are told that Anakin and Padme have an undying love for each other, but in Clone Wars, we see that they have a realistic relationship with actual problems and flaws. In the films, we are told of Anakin's dissatisfaction with the Jedi, but in Clone Wars, we see it. In the films, we are told Obi-Wan and Anakin are great friends, but in the Clone Wars, we are shown that Obi-Wan and Anakin are great friends. The Clone Wars shows us Anakin Skywalker. Ahsoka Tano is possibly the single best addition to the Star Wars universe to come out of the Clone Wars. Starting out as a Padawan, she grows throughout the series, becoming more respected as a commander and a Jedi. Her development as both a character and a Jedi is so well managed that by the end of the series, when she fights Maul, the leader of the most dangerous and unpredictable faction in the entire war, it doesn't feel like Ahsoka is too overpowered. Her skills improve exponentially while training with Anakin, to the point where she is able to hold her own against a former Sith apprentice, the man who killed Qui-Gon Jinn. Ahsoka is very similar to Anakin. She recognizes the failings of the Jedi Order, except unlike Anakin, she's strong enough to leave. This causes her to act as a foil to Anakin. Ahsoka pushes him by asking why. Why aren't the Jedi allowed to have personal relationships? Why are the Jedi dealing in politics instead of helping the weak? If the Jedi are so wise and confident in their power, why won't they acknowledge their own mistakes? This is ultimately another big reason why Anakin turns to the dark side, and it makes Ahsoka integral to the logic and story of the prequels. Another thing that separates Ahsoka from the Order is her defining character trait: empathy. Even while Ahsoka is still part of the Order, she's able to evolve past the us versus them mentality and sees the conflict less black and white than any other character. In essence, Ahsoka is an ideal Jedi in an unideal time, and it makes the audience wonder, if she had never left the Jedi, could she have saved Anakin from his fate as Darth Vader? Obi-Wan Kenobi is a character who's kept exactly the same as he is in the films, and so he should be.
Hello there.
Obi-Wan is no doubt the best part of the prequel trilogy, and a big part of that is due to his involvement in the Clone Wars. His characterization remains identical to Ewan McGregor in the films, except the situations he's placed in allow for far more depth. He's given similarities to Anakin, when we see his difficulty with his role and responsibility as a Jedi, and the struggles he faced in his past when he had to leave his love, Duchess Satine.
Had you said the word, I would have left the Jedi Order.
His grief when she is murdered is real, and his hatred for the war builds up inside of him as it continues, but Obi-Wan carefully keeps it hidden behind his humour and witty personality.
Oh no, I'm enjoying this far too much.
Despite Obi-Wan being the best character in the prequels, he was never placed in these complex and difficult situations, and it really is a credit to the series that they can make Obi-Wan Kenobi even that bit more introspective than he already was.
I am surprised you could have forgotten me so easily.
In The Phantom Menace, Darth Maul was presented as a new character who would fill the role Darth Vader played in the originals, as a Dark Lord of the Sith. But then, in the film, he has a total of 3 lines.
If the trace was correct, I will find them quickly, Master. At last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge. Yes, my Master.
Darth Maul has probably the best duel in Star Wars, but that doesn't take away that Maul wasn't much of a character in The Phantom Menace. What's amazing is that in Clone Wars, they not only gave Maul one of the best personalities in Star Wars, but they also maintained his epicness. He is enraged from his loss to Obi-Wan in The Phantom Menace, and now he's back for his revenge. And he gets it. He kills his way to the top, becoming the leader of multiple terrorist organizations and crime syndicates, literally beheading past leaders to take their place. Maul is just as cool and deadly as he is in the films, except now, his character is the coolest and deadliest part about him. There are many other characters that this series elevates, such as Grievous, Ventress, Dooku, Yoda even. However, the characters I talked about previously really capture the essence of the Clone Wars and the impact it has on the people involved. What are the prominent themes in Star Wars? Good versus evil, courage, family, power, and hope. These themes are all featured in the Clone Wars, and as such, these stories feel like Star Wars. However, not in the way anyone would think. It takes these relatively simple themes from the films and flips them, meaning that the Clone Wars doesn't only feature these themes, it analyses and often scrutinises them. A great example of this is the episode Heroes on Both Sides. This episode sees Senator Padme Amidala being escorted by Ahsoka Tano on a diplomatic mission to try and form a peace treaty with the Separatists to bring the Clone Wars to a peaceful conclusion. This is the first time Ahsoka meets the people of the Separatist Alliance, and the first time she realises that, no, they're not all bad.
You think we're all the bad guys. How many Separatists have you met?
None. You and your mother are the first.
Well, look at me. Am I so bad?
This story not only adds depth to the Clone Wars in general, but also deals with the theme of good versus evil, and quite frankly, dismisses it. Yes, the Separatists may be seen as the bad guys of the war, like all bad guys in Star Wars are. However, here, that's not the case. This is something that we only slightly see in the films, in prominent moments like Vader's redemption, or in the skewed ideals and the arrogant attitude of the Jedi Order.
No.
But because of episodes like these, breaking down that barrier of absolute good and evil, we're able to apply that same knowledge across the whole of Star Wars. Another Clone Wars story that does something similar is the Mortis arc. In these episodes, Anakin, Obi-Wan and Ahsoka meet physical manifestations of the Force. The daughter, who reflects the emotions associated with the light side of the Force, the son, who reflects the emotions associated with the dark side of the Force, and the father, who represents the balance between them. Anakin is summoned by the father to replace him and become his successor. However, Anakin rejects this offer, and both the father and the daughter die. This episode also deals heavily with the theme of good and evil, represented by the Force. However, it also handles the themes of corruption and balance remarkably well. This arc says a lot about the saga as a whole. The events in the episodes reflect almost exactly what happens in the films, beat for beat. In this context, the brother plays the part of Anakin. Similarly to Anakin, the brother is never fully evil. He's simply frustrated and becomes victim to his own power.
I take your power.
You underestimate my power!
However, there is one aspect where this story differs. Its stance on balance. In this story, all three Force beings die, that being the light, the dark, and the Force itself. Whereas in the films, balance is firmly rooted in the light side of the Force. In the Mortis arc, balance is the equality between the light and the dark, or rather, destruction of both. This opens up a whole other side of the Force, and makes you question if a balance in the Force, if any, can be maintained at all. As well as these episodes which really make you think, there's also great, and more importantly, fun Star Wars stories. The Clone Conspiracy storyline, where Fives finds out about organic chips in every clone trooper that will later force them to enact Order 66. Or the Mandalore arc, in which we see a pacifist society be overrun by the Death Watch led by Maul, and the civil war that ensues. Or Yoda's journey at the end of Season 6, which has the Jedi Master journey across the universe, and learn about the Force and the inevitable fate of the Jedi Order. I can't pretend every episode is great, even good. Like in every series, there's the odd blunder. As you would expect, most of these come during Series 1, where the show was still trying to find its primary audience. This resulted in a few bad episodes, such as Bombad Jedi, Downfall of a Droid, and most notoriously, the Clone Wars movie. However, what the Clone Wars does best in its stories is expand the Star Wars universe. First things first, this series features some of the best animation I've seen on television. It's cinematic, comedic, epic, and fundamentally gorgeous, especially in the later seasons. But in terms of fleshing out the world and expanding the lore, think about the films for a moment. In every film we get 2, 3, maybe 4 notable locations or planets that add a different aspect to the universe. But the audience never learns too much about them. In the Clone Wars, the audience gets to spend full episodes on planets, learning all about them, the environment, inhabitants, civilization, and stance on the war. Take for example the episodes Jedi Crash and Defenders of the Peace. In this story, Anakin, Ahsoka, and Rex, among others, crash onto the world of Maridon, a world never seen in Star Wars before or after these episodes. Yet, I know its grassy meadows and forested plains, and its natives, the Lurmen. I know the kind of social structure present in their village, with the oldest, wisest member being the leader, and how strongly against the war they are. Despite only spending around 2 episodes on this planet, I know it as well, or probably better, than many of the planets in the films. The Clone Wars shows us the Clone Wars. We don't just see the epic battles, the lightsaber duels, and the big moments that turn the tides of the war. We see high-ranking generals accompanying senators on diplomatic missions. We see the underworld, and how crime syndicates, bounty hunters, and gangsters respond and adapt to the war. We see soldiers bred for battle stuck doing busy work in outposts or research stations. Not everything is on the battlefield, because that's not how war works. War isn't isn't a constant battle. It is the diplomatic missions, the outside parties, and the unconventional duties people find themselves fulfilling in times of emergency. The Clone Wars adds depth, conflict, and realism to Star Wars that I feel is sorely lacking in many other areas of the franchise. In this relatively simple show, with only 20-minute episodes, we learn not only the ins and outs of the Clone Wars, but the depths of the entire galaxy. All three endings of this show are pure perfection. With the Clone Wars initially running only 5 seasons, the final story saw Ahsoka's departure from the Jedi Order. Ending the series this way was very effective. Many argued that Ahsoka was the main protagonist of the show, and that with the end of Ahsoka's story, so too came the end of the Clone Wars. However, this ending didn't last very long. A year or two later, Season 6 came out as a collection of lost episodes that had never been seen before. The final story of this series was Yoda's journey through the Force, which ends with Yoda reflecting on the war as a whole, letting his sadness for the inevitable loss they will face, and his hope for the future beyond that of the Clone Wars.
No longer certain that one ever does win a war, for in fighting the battles already lost we have victory. We may yet find, not victory in the Clone Wars, but victory for all time.
This ending has an admittedly lighter tone. However, it has just the right amount of melancholy to evoke an emotional reaction from the audience. It felt rather fitting for a show that never got its chance to have a complete ending, to have a more open-ended, happier finish. But, yet again, this ending didn't last. The cracked helmet of a long-gone clone trooper lies in a snowdrift, abandoned. Reflected in its clouded visor, a shadow approaching, hissing with every mechanical breath. This shadow is the man who once commanded this soldier. There's a lightsaber half buried in the snow before the helmet. The shadow picks it up and brushes it with a black-gloved hand, igniting the blade. It burns with a blue fire. It was Ahsoka's. The cry of a bird overhead draws the shadow's attention, and he casts his gaze to the skies above. Behind the black mask, his expression remains unreadable. The shadow closes his fist around the hilt, and the blade retracts. Without uttering a word, he turns and walks back in the same direction he'd come. The cracked helmet of a long-gone clone trooper lies in a snowdrift. Reflected in its clouded visor, the departing silhouette of the shadow, Anakin Skywalker, now Darth Vader, hissing with every mechanical breath. Season 7 of The Clone Wars was something else entirely, ending The Clone Wars with a bang, showing audiences across the world what they'd been wanting to see for over half a decade. Fans of the show when it started in 2008 were grown up now, and the ending reflected that. No hope, no redemption, no victory. The plain white of the stormtroopers contrasts harshly yet brilliantly with the painted, unique armour of the clone troopers. This is the Empire. The Republic has fallen. The Clone Wars is over, and the troopers that we all loved are gone. It's taken me over a month to write this video. I can't quite put into words how I feel about the Clone Wars. Like many popular things, it's hard to distinguish between what's nostalgia and what's genuinely good. But after a long time writing and a rewatch of a lot of the show, the Clone Wars is great. At the very beginning of this video, I asked what makes a good spin-off series, and this is it. It feels like Star Wars, but it also feels different. And that's a good thing. It takes areas that the films aren't able or willing to cover and expands on them in an original way that makes it overall better. The Clone Wars made me love Star Wars more than I already did, and it's one of the biggest reasons why I'm still a fan of it today. In the end, the Clone Wars will always be remembered for its great additions to the Star Wars universe. The great characters like Ahsoka Tano and Captain Rex. The great stories that change the way we feel about Star Wars. The lore behind some of the most iconic moments in film history. And the tragedy that was the Clone Wars. I hope you enjoyed this video. I've worked really hard on it over the last couple months. Thanks to everyone who's subscribing, and thanks to everyone who's starting to find my channel because of these new videos I'm doing. But anyway, with that said, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, comment. I've been Max, and I'll see you next time.